Hello everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar, Advanced Email Security by Optiv and Proofpoint. I am your host, Mindy Stubbs, Demand Generation Coordinator here at Optiv. Before we get started, a few items of housekeeping. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the next few days for on-demand viewing. You can see here on the console that we have several resources you can use during or following the webinar. This includes some resources we think you'll find valuable when it comes to your security program. We have our speaker bios, social sharing buttons, and a Q&A chat box on the right. You'll also find all these same widgets on your toolbar as you scroll to the bottom of your screen. Regarding the Q&A chat box, we will be having someone monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar and during the Q&A period. However, we may not get to every question. If we don't answer your question, we will follow up after the webinar. Let me take a moment to introduce our speakers, Rami Raman and Eric Schwake. Rami Raman brings more than 10 years of technical experience and solutions selling to his current role. As an Optiv Solutions Architect based in Southern California, Rami has an in-depth understanding of how to map security technology and services to business needs. A subject matter expert in emerging technologies focused on addressing advanced cyber threats, his technical skill set helps address multiple real-world problems. Rami graduated from the University of Kansas in 2009 and holds a degree in information systems with an emphasis on information security. Eric Schwake is Group Product Marketing Manager for Proofpoint's Advanced Email Security Solutions. Before coming to Proofpoint, Eric worked with the security products at Cisco and was at Symantec before that. Eric has over 12 years of information security experience with a range of positions from technical support to sales to product marketing. Eric is a certified information systems security professional. Now let's get things started. I'll turn it over to our speakers.
All right, thank you very much, Mindy. And this is Rami F. Rahman. I'm the Senior Solutions Architect for Optiv, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into a quick agenda. We're going to go into a quick introduction of Optiv, review the current state of email security threats, go over some email security quick hits. Proofpoint will then have their presentation, and we'll go into Q&A. Let's get started. So who is Optiv? Optiv is the largest security solutions integrator worldwide. We've served over 7,600 clients in the past 3 years. We cater to 74 of the Fortune 100 and 630 of the Fortune 1000. 80% of our business is repeat client business. That's the part that I really love. It's a testament to the established trusted relationships we've developed allowing us to work on a wide variety of information security issues. We've got over 1,600 information security experts on staff, and we work with over 300 information technology partners as we continue to learn and share our insight and experience with clients. We are able to help them make informed decisions on their information security programs, and we offer up our view of the security landscape. So what does the threat landscape with regards to email look like today? Well, we know that attacks are more sophisticated across all the verticals. Attacks are coming not only over traditional email, but social networking messaging too. They're leveraging publicly available data to create targeted attacks meant to evoke a quick response. For example, we might actually see messages that say things like, your daughter Jane Doe has been involved in an accident. Click here to find out what hospital she's located at. Pretty scary stuff. I don't care who you are. Most people are going to try to click on that link just from being scared. Also, the large amount of data that's publicly available on social networks and the dark web complement much of the data from recent breaches, all of which get used to craft these different types of phishing attacks. We also have seen an uptick of ransomware campaigns that will target multiple different departments like finance, HR, marketing. For example, we know the WannaCry malware started out as an attachment targeting accountants with an update to widely used financial software, fooling them into clicking this so-called quote-unquote update. There's also been a significant shift to moving email into the cloud. Organizations are no longer hosting email security internally, and this creates some challenges around the security controls that can be applied. And finally, we're seeing an increase in things like typo squatting on a misspelled domain, domain abuse, spoofing of not only your organization's domain, but also attackers are acting and impersonating lawyers, administrative assistants, or C-level executives in their phishing emails to get users to click on suspicious links. So let's go over some email security quick hits that you can do in your organization to get started. First, we need to evaluate the threats to the business, understand what the data that flows through email is, and how to gain visibility and control it across all the different types of messaging platforms. Next, we should be able to detect negatively impacting events by leveraging email security that has threat intelligence tied to it. Also does URL sandboxing. Maybe perform some data loss prevention as well to protect your PII. Maybe even doing some dynamic analysis and detailed forensics to show you what type of links are being clicked in the emails and what's happening when users do click on links. Next, we should be able to respond with improved visibility to threats and apply a policy to deal with suspicious messages from all the different types of multiple threat vectors. And finally, let's try to do some proactive prevention of your brand or reputation, right? So let's maybe think about registering possibly related domains to your business before attackers do, or look for misspelled versions of your domain. And most importantly, promote security awareness training across the entire organization. That's really key. So we've teamed up today with Proofpoint, and we're uniting forces to our joint customers to provide a complete solution that allows you to address the multiple different threat vectors around email, offers a rapid and comprehensive detection against advanced threats, and can be easily configured with very little effort. So now I'll turn it over to Eric.
Hey, thanks, Rami. Thanks for the intro from Optiv, and I definitely appreciate everybody's time today to listen to what we're talking about with Proofpoint, as well as teaming up with Optiv is a huge benefit for us because of Optiv's experience, and working with them is a great benefit to you as customers. So it's sort of beneficial to everybody involved. What I want to cover today is sort of Proofpoint advanced email security play. And there's if you know anything about Proofpoint, we've been in the email security market for a number of years, and we've branched off to do stuff that is, CASB and everything else. But today we're going to focus around the email security landscape and what we can do to make sure your email is secure as possible, because we know that most threats will come in that way, and a lot of data is exfiltrated that way. So what can Proofpoint do to make sure we have as little risk to your organization as possible? Before we get into some of the solutions we can have to help you, let's sort of talk about the threat landscape a little bit, just to give you a sense of what we're thinking about when we look at what our products can do for their customers. Obviously, the big thing that everybody on the call knows is business is key to your business, and it will continue to be key to your business for the foreseeable future. Just a couple stats here that point that out, right? I mean, massive growth of emails year over year. 225 billion emails are sent per day amongst organizations that we track. Employees are on email constantly, and if you talk to employees, they say it's critical to what they do with whatever job they have in an organization. Now, knowing that business is run on email, obviously that's where the attackers go to try and make their money. They understand that is potentially a weak link, and so that's what they try and attack. And more and more we're actually seeing them go after actual users. And we're looking at what is the weak link within the email infrastructure. Maybe you've hardened your firewalls to the point that those are really hard to get through, but again, there's these users sitting in that email inbox, and we want to figure out how we can get into them and make an attack that way. And so we have some various statistics here around that, but the key is that, like Rami mentioned before, social engineering is a huge thing where these attackers will go on to LinkedIn, Facebook, learn what is important to their user they're going after, and then specifically craft emails to target those individuals within an organization. And the slide looks a little funky on my side, but I hope it looks okay for you guys. But for email fraud, we're seeing that as a major issue as well, where these are the types of attacks that come through your organization that are malware free, essentially. So it's the kind of email where an attacker says, hey, I'm X, Y, and Z supplier. You need to wire me some money to this account. And for users to detect those kinds of threats on their own is becoming more and more challenging. So we need ways, and more advanced ways than just your standard email security products, to detect those kinds of threats. This is the attack kill chain. This is something that was established quite a bit of time ago by Lockheed Martin, and it sort of talks about how attackers go about it, reaching into organizations. And as you see, there's various methodology used from the recon to weaponization of threats to break into the organization and delivery of that, and obviously, as you go forward, exploitation, installation, and command and control, which leads to those attackers being able to steal your confidential data at the end of the day. Now, in our mind, the Proofpoint, the most effective way to handle these threats is at the beginning of that kill chain. Right? If we can prevent those types of threats getting to that user, allowing that user to act on that email, that's where we want to stop the threat. Because if you can do that, then you're leaving it out of the user's hands, right? And I mean, training of the users is very important. We have training materials at Proofpoint, and with the Wombat acquisition, we have the ability to do very strong training for the user. But the end goal, of course, is to make sure that we leave as much out of the user's decision-making process as possible. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about today will really help you learn what we can do at the first part of that kill chain. And then once again, when we talk about the users and how those are being impacted, again, the defenders generally look at, and your security organizations generally look at the firewalls and stuff on the endpoint. Let's put an endpoint security solution on there. But when you look at what the attackers are going after, they're looking at the people. A lot of the money spent around trying to protect your organization is, again, spent on the edge of the network and maybe on the endpoint side. As we go throughout the day and we talk about what we can do, the idea is let's spend a little more of that budget and look at the email threat vector as a way to start solving some more of these problems for you than you would be able to solve by just building more and more firewalls that might or might not be effective to some of these more sophisticated attacks that these bad actors are going after. So with that, let's go ahead and get started and talk about some of the actual products that Proofpoint has in our portfolio to help handle some of these problems. Now, the first one, of course, would be our email protection. The secure email gateway. This is, again, what we started with at Proofpoint over 12 years ago, and it continues to be a very important aspect of your overall email architecture. Now, there's a lot of secure email gateways out there, but what I want to highlight is some of the keys that we do that are a bit differentiated from some of the competitors that you might have heard about. The first is our policy capabilities. So our email firewall and our email antivirus, right? Building up some strong policy before the email can be delivered around, should this user be receiving emails from this kind of user, from an untrusted sender? Creating policy around whether or not you want executable attachments being sent on to end users. That initial action taken around an email is very important, and our capabilities on the firewall side are actually much more robust than some of the competitors that are out there in the market, and having that robustness at that front edge is really important when we first talk about handling of these emails. And a little more about the email firewall flexibility. This is sort of a word bubble around all the different ways rules can be written. So it's extremely flexible is the end goal of this, right? We have 55 different attributes with up to 4 subsets of each of those. And so you can get extremely complex with how you want your email just routed in general throughout your organization based on what your particular needs are within your specific organization. You might have very simple policies based on your specific routing, or you could have very complex policies based on if you need email routed differently based on users and what kind of information you're actually receiving into your organization. The second thing that we want to talk about within email protection is our machine learning capability to handle some of the more advanced threats. SCSS is our stateful common site scoring service. And when we're looking at more advanced targeted threats, a lot of the competitors have these silos of intelligence. And so they have one bit of intelligence here and then another bit of intelligence there, and they're not really talking to each other. Oftentimes the rules around that are trained using test emails. So it's sort of a very manual process, and updates take a bit of time. So it's for threats that are spreading very rapidly, that kind of siloed approach becomes much less effective. With SCSS, we actually combine information and we share it amongst various systems within our backend tools. So header information, sender reputation, IP, content of the emails, it's all shared amongst the different information gathering capabilities we have. It's also machine learning powered, so it's a self-learning technology, and of course, because it's machine learning, it is continually updated with whatever new changes are coming in through your organization, and it's tailored to specific information that comes into your organization, which makes it much more effective than just a standard rule that might apply to everybody. We can now create rules that essentially apply to your specific email traffic patterns and content you're actually seeing within your organization. Sort of an example of what we can do with SCSS, right? We can do sender reputation and sender and recipient reputation, which is something that a lot of vendors can do. So they can look at how bad or good does a sender look when they're sending in information or an email into your organization. We're also language agnostic in our content analysis. So we go a little bit of a step above what other vendors can do. And we actually look at the sort of the ones and zeros of an email. And again, this really is important for those business email compromise attacks, the attacks that are malware free. We don't have a URL, we don't have an attachment to look at, but what we can look at is, does this user usually send emails into my organization? What is the content? What does actually the content of the body of the email look like? Does it look like something my users would normally receive? If not, we can flag that and allow you to very easily determine that could be a kind of business email compromise, or another term for those is imposter-based attacks. So again, what this means for you is you're going to have increased email protection against email fraud. Your users actually have greater control around it as well, because they can actually help train the system. So if they see an email come through that they don't want to see or they're not sure about, they can mark that, and we'll actually learn based on their feedback of that email. And overall, it gives the users a better experience, because they're not going to be receiving these emails that are either spam-like or imposter-based attacks that could impact them negatively if they send confidential information off to an attacker. The other thing we can do is unwanted email management. So this sort of goes back with SCSS, but again, it allows for users to have sort of an individualized control of their inbox. The very nice thing about this is that it becomes a hands-off approach. Generally, with a lot of some of the older tools, your email administrators are on the hook to do a lot of this work. So a user says, hey, I got this bulk email from some user group or news group I signed up for, I don't really want it anymore, and then your administrator has to figure out how to reroute that so they don't receive those emails. With our tools, we allow that user to actually specify what they do and don't want, and the system learns automatically based on that interaction with the user to either not deliver the email or deliver it to their bulk email box. And also it's community and crowdsourced, so that we have this information that doesn't just specify information around your organization, but as your users supply information around the email, what it might be, whether good or bad, that also gets shared with the broader community, so that you could have benefit from the larger community, of course. So again, just a couple of things to carry over here with the email protection in and of itself. The visibility is key, because we have a vast majority of the Fortune 1000 companies, and of course all of those are feeding information back into our systems to increase overall effectiveness of our tools. Advanced machine learning, like I mentioned with SCSS, the machine learning, or AI, if you want to call it that, we call it machine learning here, but the machine learning capability to automatically be able to detect and track those imposter threats is a key benefit of our solution. The ability to have very strong policy around what emails go where within an organization, as well as a self-learning from your user base to make sure that you have the ability to automatically have whatever needs to show up in their user inbox go there automatically for them. Now, when we talk about the email protection, one of the things we often talk about is the data and how we can make sure that we have the most up-to-date data. And that comes to with our targeted attack protection capabilities. Now, many organizations that are out there that are security organizations will have this detection capability that is sort of built in. And so this first box you're seeing, many organizations will have similar functionality around this, right? They'll be able to look at various malware code that comes in. They'll be able to apply different types of machine learning in their cloud infrastructure to look at that email. If there's non-malware based threats, they'll be able to provide some information around that. And so targeted attack protection is our capability to do all that initial detection of those threats. But further than that, we need more detail around threats. If we're not sure about a threat, if this is some zero-day targeted threat that we've never seen before in the wild, a lot of those will try and evade sandboxes. So we have advanced sandbox evasion capabilities to determine, oh, this piece of malware is trying to just evade my sandbox as we ran it through. Of course, that triggers us and says, well, that's not a thing that normal piece of software does. So it lets us provide deeper analysis around that. But this intel extracting capability allows us to really get the nuts and bolts of what a piece of malware is actually trying to accomplish within a endpoint if it actually got to that endpoint. And then we carry on to the analysis and correlation. So we've been able to detect and being able to extract intelligence out of threat. But finally, we need to be able to tell you as the end customer what those threats we're trying to do. And so this is where we correlate all the information around threats and provide you with very detailed analysis and visibility around what the threat was doing. We can sort of categorize those into threat campaigns. We can let you know if particular individuals might have been targeted. We can even go further. If you are a customer that needs extremely detailed, sort of more hands-on approach to this with our customer-initiated research, with our PTIS team, they can actually provide you specific actionable intelligence from a human threat ops member of Proofpoint that lets you know exactly what a threat was doing or trying to do within your organization so that you have that information, who it was targeting, and be able to proactively react to any threats that might be going after you specifically. Now, all this data that we have from the detection, intel extraction, and the analysis and correlation goes into the Nexus platform, and that Nexus platform feeds various systems within Proofpoint. It feeds our email protection that I just mentioned a bit ago. It also feeds into our CASB and different tools we have. But again, the end goal of it is to provide all this intelligence to the tools we have that need it as a means to increase overall effectiveness when we're looking at threats that you might be experiencing within your organization and prevent those threats from impacting you negatively. So as I mentioned, so we're able to look at all of those threats, determine if they're broad or targeted threats. We can do some really cool things within the TAP dashboard where we can say, was there a list of VIP users you might have in your organization, maybe C-level executives? And if there are, we can determine if a threat was actually targeted specifically to them. We're moving into this new point of view here at Proofpoint called very attacked people. So we can actually show you who's the most attacked within an organization and let you know that what impact that might have caused. We're also able to not only on initial view of a piece of malware, look at it, we're able to inspect retroactively. What I mean by that is if a piece of malware or a malicious URL gets into a user's inbox, we will still provide analysis around that at click. So maybe we didn't detect it when it came into the user's inbox, but after it was tried to be run or the URL was tried to be clicked on, we can actually do analysis on that on the fly, essentially, so that it can't be run. For URL, it's really important because a lot of times when we're looking at some of the URL attack campaigns, the URL is initially not weaponized. So when it goes into a user's inbox, it is a benign domain. But eventually, after a certain time frame, it does become malicious, and so we have the ability to say, well, that's fine. We can still analyze it on click and prevent that user from going to that, or block that particular URL. And then, of course, like I said, the detailed forensics and reporting is really important. So if you need that for your SOC team, if you need that further information around what the threat's doing, we can give you that as well. And now what I want to talk about is internal mail and the problems with that. And so before we get into what we can do for that, one of the big new things we're seeing with attackers is the compromise of accounts. And so they're looking at ways to break into your organization, and rather than just sort of immediately start exfiltrating data, they sort of take ownership of that account. Right? A lot of us are moving to O365 Office in the cloud, and so that's a really big threat vector where if the attacker can gain access to my O365 account, then they can do all of their attacks from this quote-unquote trusted email account. Right? So we can start sending malware attacks from there. We can start sending phishing attacks. You can start sending potentially imposter-based, BEC type attacks. So we're seeing these attackers really try and essentially take over the accounts in your organizations and then stealthily use those accounts to send malware internally. So various ways they can go about doing that. Of course, phishing is one of the first ways they would do it. Say, hey, Eric, click on this link and see what kind of attack, see what kind of new car you might be owned next month or whatever. And then I become infected and they can maybe take over my account. And then obviously the brute force and malware-based attacks. And you see there's a list of folks here that are at risk for those. And I would say even with the normal people you would expect, when you look at the attacks, it actually might not be the executive. It might be the assistant to the executive. Because again, there's only one step away from the keys of the kingdom. If you can get the executive's assistant to be that compromised account, then you're able to get all the information from that person that you might need. Here's a little visual of how that might work. So we have an attacker and they send information or a piece of malware to a particular user or a group of users. Once they're in there, they essentially are now attackers within that specific organization. So they can start sending out malware campaigns or whatnot to individual users within an organization. It's very hard for an average user that's in the same organization to think that their coworker might be infected with malware. They would expect that, they're going to send me a good link or a good attachment. I'm going to click on that. So it's a very easy propagation method for these attackers. And then it goes a step further because within some of these walled gardens we have in the cloud world, there's implicit trust amongst organizations. So what we're seeing is that once you have a foothold in one organization, then those attackers can then start sending this same type of attack to other organizations that might be within those same walled gardens. There's still this trusted user, and so the threat or the spread of those attacks, let me go back here. The spread of those attacks becomes, I'm sorry, I'm messing the slides up. The spread of the attacks becomes much easier for the end threat actor to go about and do their business. So it's a pretty bad thing. And then the other problem with this is that in general, we don't see a lot of organizations doing scanning of that internal email flow. And if you think about it, you're probably 2 to 5 times more internal email than external email. So just the lift itself to do all that scanning becomes a detriment to doing this. But what we've introduced is what's called the IMD, Internal Mail Defense Solution, that allows us to easily not only scan the internal email, but also provide the intelligence around it to provide you visibility into potential compromised accounts, as well as being able to pull emails out of your email store that could be of malicious intent. So as you see, the way it works is we essentially journal all of your emails to our IMD cloud service, and it is a cloud-based service. We do various scans around that email to determine if it's malicious in nature. If the email flags as being malicious, we then do a call out to our trap solution, which I'll actually talk about trap in a little bit later here. But with trap, it allows us to then say, well, this message or these messages look malicious in nature. We can now go back into our Exchange or Office 365 environment, and pull those messages out of that flow so that they cannot be passed along to anybody else. So two benefits, obviously, is it cuts that traffic in. It basically cuts the flow of the malicious traffic at the gate. In addition to that, though, you then get that visibility, which is really important because a lot of times you don't even know there's compromised accounts within an organization. It's hard to detect those, and so this provides you information about, oh, this user's a compromised account. His credentials could have been phished. I need to go and deal with that and reset his credentials, whatever you need to do. But now you're going to have that visibility into that particular user and be able to act on that very easily. The next thing that's really important to talk about is sort of what's your email, what kind of data is being used within an email, in your email. Because again, if you think about, like I said back at the beginning of at the session today, email is a huge business driver, and almost everybody on this call is probably using it for critical business needs. And so being able to look at all of that email that you're using and make sure the stuff that is confidential or sensitive to you does not leave is really important. Right. So we have a really simple and comprehensive DLP solution that's built into email protection that allows you to look at all email flow and provide analysis around that, right? So there's a few different things. When you talk about the first layer here, the attribute analysis, this is just looking at data, right? So it's looking at what's important to you, and there's various ways we can do that, whether it's from the to and from lines of an email, That's a very simple type of information to look at for us. Obviously we have an MTA that can provide information around all of that. So if there's specific users who shouldn't be sending emails to other users or whatever, we can provide, create policy around that. More importantly, though, is probably that structured data that you have that's in your organization. Things like social security numbers or credit card numbers or health records or anything like that, where that's stuff you don't want leaving the organization. We can provide analysis to look at all that information and make sure that we see it and allow you to act on that. And then the third type of data we look at is this unstructured data. So let's say that you're in an organization you don't necessarily, well, you might have some of the data I talked about that's structured, but you might have data around, earnings information or specific stuff that is your organization really cares about that doesn't fall into the structured categories that we might have. Our unstructured data analysis allows us to essentially ingest whatever is important data to you and then create rules around that. And so obviously the point here is that we can sort of look at any data that's being sent through your organization, and then at the flip side of that, once we know what's important to you, we have unlimited policy capability to provide policies on that to prevent that email from being either spread. If you don't want to block it entirely, we can do that, of course. If you want the email to be encrypted on the way out, we can do that. So you can create policies around what exactly you want to do when we flag a DLP policy as we see it come through through email. Couple of things that are key to our DLP capabilities. The remediation of DLP incidents can be done by your security teams, and you also have the ability to allow self-remediation. So if you want to provide users the ability to go in and say, oh wait, this should be flagged for whatever reason, you can do that, or you can have it done specifically by your security team or compliance officers. We do integrate with any external systems. So you might have a broader-based DLP solution that you're using that's not necessarily focused on email. We can integrate with that very easily. So there's no problem there. The nice thing is that one of the things that we oftentimes will hear customers talk about is how easy our DLP solution is to set up. I've worked at Symantec, as was mentioned before, and I know they have that DLP solution. And that can be sort of complex to set up. There's a lot of things that are going into that. A good way to start with DLP in my mind is with email, because that's generally where a lot of data is going to be sent from, and you don't want it leaving the organization through email. So we can do that, and it makes it make it a very simple process for you to do that as well. So again, just to wrap that up, right? So being able to accurately detect any of the information that might be critical to you, and then also the ability to create rules around that. There are obviously pre-built rules and dictionaries within email protection that allow you to rule out policy very quickly. But again, if you need to get granular and specific for your specific use case within your organization, we can do that as well. And then the end goal of all of this is hopefully achieving compliance, whether or not it's HIPAA or GDPR or any other compliance mechanisms you might be under. We can do that and help you achieve that through DLP. Now, I'd like to think about encryption as the sort of the stepsister or the sister of DLP, because obviously if you flag incidents, you might still want to be able to deliver those incidents that have been flagged as a DLP problem. And so the way to do that is with encryption. Now, we have the ability to create policy from DLP and encryption to encrypt specific emails based on the content of those emails. You can expire those messages. We make it very easy to handle the keys. We have a simplified key management solution that allows it so that it's not going to be a major uplift for your security team to implement the encryption capabilities within Proofpoint. And it's also very easy for end users to use. The nice thing is we have several different ways that encryption flows. We can either use TLS encryption, and if there's an established trusted relationship with that end recipient, of course, that TLS encryption will flow and it'll be sent over no problems. However, if for whatever reason TLS can't be achieved by the between your user or your sender and the recipient, then we can of course switch over to our native DLP encryption or our encryption capabilities that allow that user essentially log into a portal. So if I was to receive an email from one of our customers, I can simply log into an encryption portal or the web portal, and view that entire message, including any attachments that might be associated with that message. So as I mentioned, the encryption is an important aspect of the overall data protection story when you're talking about DLP and encryption and email in general. We want to make sure that no one can see that data that's important to you. Only the intended recipient can see it. We provide the full life cycle of that encrypted email so that your security team will always know what's happening with that email. We can end of life it and expire the email if it's not read in a timely fashion. And of course, being able to provide a simplified key management capability around that is also important. We don't want to add extra burden to your already, I'm sure, overtaxed security admins or email admins. The other thing we want to talk about is continuity. And as we said, many people are moving to cloud-based solutions, and so being able to have your user's email always working is quite important. And so with email continuity, we've integrated that capability with the products I've already spoken about today, with email protection, DLP, and encryption, so that it's not sort of a standalone thing. It's automatically integrated with those. It's very easy to configure, and it's always on. And the users will also have a seamless experience, whether they're using the Outlook on their computer or Outlook on their phone or anything else. The experience will be the same, and they won't sort of have a jarring experience from one device to the next. So as we see, when you have continuity in place, and I think there was just a story recently about some outages with O365, and the problem is when we talk to security teams and mail teams, as we move to the cloud, one of the worries is that you lose access to that information. You lose access to knowing when those servers are going to be back up. If it's an Exchange environment, those guys can go there, they can start working on them with their hands and know sort of what's happening with those servers. When we're trusting essentially someone else with that information and with those backend servers, we really don't know when data is going to be coming back up and when we're going to be back up and functional. So you need a way to continue business function when those things happen, and they will happen. Unfortunately, there's just no way to prevent outages, and they are something that happens. So being able to provide a way for you to make sure that we have business continuing to work even if outages happen is really important, and something that we're seeing a lot of customers looking at, especially as they make this move to the cloud. The other thing, and we'll close out with Trap, and so we've sort of talked about throughout the last few solutions, was sort of the detection capability and how we block that, and the ability to look at data and make sure data doesn't leave an organization. But then there's also the response aspect of that, because the fact of the matter is there's no security solution in the world, no matter how much I'd love to say it, that is 100% effective. We do as good as we can, right? I mean, we're something like 99.9% effective on threats that come in and that we see, but there's always some threats that might get through any company's security solutions. So being able to respond to threats that might have gotten through, slip through the cracks is a really important capability that we have. And the way we do that is with our threat response auto pool. And this is something that was part of the IMD solution I mentioned before, but it can be a standalone solution as well. But essentially what it does is a couple things. Firstly, we collect information from various sources. So the nice thing about Trap is that we're not just looking at data sources from Proofpoint, we're looking at data sources from other vendors you might be using that are security minded. And so we take all that, we collect all of it, we correlate it, and we show it in our threat response dashboard. And then we act on that. So not just giving visibility into threats we might not have seen, but we have the ability to then go back in after the fact and do quarantine on those threats. So if a threat gets through, we can actually look at that. And so this sort of talks about some of those benefits of auto pull and what we can do. This is a really big thing for security admins, and oftentimes what we see when I'm talking to customers about trap at different shows or in person or whatever, they're talking about, well, we sort of have this ability, we can see the attack happen after the fact, but then we have to have some PowerShell script or something else where we go and we try and sort of manually strip those messages out of users' inboxes. We've eliminated the need to do that. We do that automatically for you, so you can set up automated policy around, if the threat does come through and we didn't catch it on the way in, well, we need to go back into there and determine that it, happened and pull it out of the user's inboxes. The other cool thing about that is that we have the ability to not only just look at where, that patient 0, let's say I was lucky enough to get some brand new malware. More than likely, the malware tried to spread itself. So again, it might compromise account and try to spread to other users. We actually would be able to show you the spread of that threat and what other users in your organization received that threat, and remove it from all of those users. So it's not just the one user that we're going to sort of clean up and deal with. We're going to clean up any users that might have received that email. So we have support for 365 and Exchange. Again, we're going to have full ability to look at emails across all vectors that you might be experiencing. And then we have, again, for people who are curious about responding to threat, we can respond to them very quickly. We reduce the overall exposure. That's the goal, is to understand that, we might not be able to catch every threat that comes into your organization, but we're going to provide you the ability to very rapidly respond to that and remove that threat, cut it off at the knees, but also provide visibility around the spread and what kind of damage that threat might have caused to your organization, so that your security teams have a much better handle on that. So with that being said, we're about 15 or so minutes, I guess. Do we have any? I don't know if we have any questions in the Q&A window yet. It doesn't look like I don't know if we have any yet there.
I've got some questions on my end. Yeah, and just a reminder, you guys can go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A chat box, but I did have some come up. So, Eric, how granular can the DLP policy be?
Yeah, as I explained, it can get extremely granular. So you can do everything from, like I said, we have the ability to look at unstructured data. So that's very granular. It can be as specific to your organization as possible. It could be, again, an earnings announcement that is very specific to you, and we can create policy around that, and we can create policy around which users should be able to send email to which other users, and what to do with that email when we do trigger on that email. So it's very granular, and it can get very specific to your organization. But the nice thing is, like I said, it's pretty easy to set up as well. So a lot of times you don't have these very granular needs. You just say, hey, I don't want credit card numbers to leave my organization. And so we have pre-built dictionaries around that and policies around that to very easily set those up so that you can easily run those DLP policies right out of the box, essentially. So it's not going to take your security team, months and months to figure this out. You can get it up and running very rapidly. And then that's oftentimes what we'll see customers do, right? We'll sort of use the standard pre-built policies, dictionaries that are built in. As they get comfortable with it, then they have the ability to go in there and get, like I said, extremely specific with how they're going to set up various policy.
Great, awesome. How about, what other technologies does Proofpoint's threat intel integrate with, and does that integration disrupt email flow?
So we integrate with Trap specifically, as I showed you on the Trap slide a second ago. We actually integrate with quite a few different security vendors, Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Cisco. There's a whole range of different vendors that we'll actually import data from to provide you intelligence in the Trap interface. In addition, in our TAP dashboard, we can actually, of course, we have our own sandboxing capabilities that are built into the tool. But let's say you are a Palo Alto Wildfire customer, you can also integrate with the Wildfire sandbox as well to provide that level of sort of an additional level of sandboxing capability into your TAP organization. And as far as email flow, it doesn't really impact it at all, right? I mean, the end goal of our product is to, as quickly as possible, deliver the message where it needs to go, right? And so whether or not we need to scan it and do those sorts of tools on it, do those sorts of tests on it, the end goal is to make sure we do that as rapidly as possible. And so sometimes we'll do things where we don't really know right away if a threat is in a URL, but we might suspect something, so we can provide different things in a message body or header that says that, and then do further analysis on, in our sandbox while the user has the email. And like I said, we have the ability after click even for those users to, when they click an email URL, to be redirected if it does become malicious in nature. But the end goal is to make sure that you guys get the email and your very important business emails continue to flow as rapidly as possible. But we provide that security layer on top of it to ensure that you're not getting compromised with breaches, because that's obviously really important as well. So.
Awesome, thanks. So just another reminder, feel free to submit your questions. This is our last one unless somebody else has one, but what can users do to better train the Proofpoint solution to be more accurate?
Well, one of the things, this sort of goes back to SCSS, the Stateful Composite Scoring Service. That actually is a trained system. And what I mean by that is when SCSS is running, it's based on information we're seeing within your specific organization. Now, that doesn't mean we don't bring in information from our broader cloud security architecture, but essentially what it does is it trains itself on what a baseline email flow looks like for your organization. So it knows when, if Eric at proofpoint.com sends your users emails all the time, well, that looks normal. If Eric at, abcxyz.com sends an email, that's not normal. So that would be something that would maybe flag us and provide a different scoring criteria based on that. So it's really important, with that being said, to make sure that you have SCSS turned on to allow us to get that visibility into your organization to see that. And the other thing is, you want to make sure when you're, part of it is within protection, you want to make sure that we're getting access to your URLs and attachments. So part of the process of being able to make sure that we're seeing all the malicious information that might be going after you is to be able to do analysis on that app on the fly, and or once we see it. And if you're not allowing us to get that visibility and see that information, it's something that will potentially make your overall effectiveness a bit less. And this sort of doesn't. This is not learning in the systems tool. This is more learning for your people. But since we mentioned learning, I want to give a call out to Wombat, who we acquired, that has a really strong capability around phishing simulation and phishing training for your end users. Because again, a part of this is that you need to make sure that the end users, when they see emails that don't look right, they have the wherewithal to understand what looks good and doesn't look good. So having the ability to train them on that easily is really important. I actually just went through, I've been in security for 12 years or whatever, but so I think I have a fairly good handle on what looks good and bad as far as emails go. But I just went through our Wombat trainings as a requirement of working here, and they were great. I mean, they were very to the point and interactive, and it made it a pretty easy learning process. And so I think that's an important thing to think about when you talk about sort of learning overall, is to make sure that your users have been trained or learned what to know, what to look for when emails do come through that they need to be suspicious of.
Great. Well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have had submitted. So That concludes today's webinar. I want to thank you, Eric and Rami, for presenting, and also the participants. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and please expect a follow-up email to be sent to you shortly, which will include links to review today's webinar recording and additional resources. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Mindy. Thank you all to the Optiv attendees and Optiv clients. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and one thing, and speaking of Optiv, I sort of mentioned this at the beginning of my session, is definitely work with Optiv. We went today over a very high level of all of these solutions. Now you can get much more granular with any of these, and so definitely work with Optiv as a trusted partner to sort of, they'll give you much better understanding maybe of how all these specific components fit very well within your specific organization. So I would definitely reach out to them. They know exactly what they're talking about with sort of everything security-wise, but specifically with Proofpoint products, and so they can help you figure out what the best sort of fit and ways to incorporate our products into your overall security architecture. So thanks for everybody.
Thanks. Bye.